I'm going to start recording now because I'm going to start letting people in.
Right.
And
Okay.
what I usually do with this is after the talk, probably within a day or so, because it takes me a while to upload it all to YouTube. I usually put it on YouTube, but only for the people in the Facebook group for the first week. To
Okay.
have a look at it, the people, and that's a closed group. And then after a week, I usually just open it up then on YouTube and let anyone view it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what would be good afterwards is if I can get all the links for you as well to anything you want to link to, your websites, your blogs, your books, and everything. I can add all that data to the YouTube video as well, so that people can have direct links.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent. And you're okay with me if I promote my books or
Absolutely.
if people
Yeah,
ask me to?
these are usually general chats, but you're like the guest of honor tonight, so it's all about you. Do whatever you
Okay. Yeah, because I got some new things going.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna admit we got 30 people waiting, so I'm just gonna let them all in now, and I guess they'll all start saying hello. And it might be a bit chaotic,
Okay.
but I'll try to keep control of it as much as I can. So they should all be popping in now in the windows.
Oh, Julie. Yeah.
Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
And how are you all doing?
I'm good, thanks. Long time.
Yeah, it's been a few weeks since the last one, hasn't it?
How long has it been? Is it a month?
It's got to be about 4 weeks, I think. Yeah. It got a bit hard to do them after a while because lots of family commitments come up because it's the summer and everything. Bear with me a second while I admit some more people here.
Yeah. Hi, Julie. Hi, Carl.
So as everyone can see, Angela's here already, and she's going to be the guest of honor tonight. So it'd be great if you all have loads of questions to ask her. As before, if people don't want to talk, they can always add their questions through text typing in the chat window, and you should find that with a little button on the bottom of your screen. But anyone else that wants to ask a question, it'd be great if you could keep your mic generally muted most of the time. But when you have something to say, then unmute your mic and just butt in and ask Angela whatever you want, or if you have a question for anyone else here on the night, really. But generally for Angela tonight.
May I just ask, is that mute? No, it's not, is it?
Is what mute? Sorry.
You can hear me, can't you?
Yes, we can hear you now. Yes.
I'm gonna mute my mic. Hello, everybody. Blessings from Ireland.
Hi there.
Hi.
Hi, guys.
So it's great to see so many of you. Who wants to start off then? Who's got something that they want to ask Angela? This is where it goes silent.
I got one. Hey, Angela, big fan. I'm just going to get right into the kooky stuff. Have you done any remote viewing on Mount Hayes or some of the other underground bases? And did you pick up anything ET related or nefarious related?
I haven't directly done any remote viewing, although I've read of others remote viewing. Of course, the Pat Price and Fred, from the Monroe Institute, Skip Atwater. But I haven't personally, although I've looked at other locations. Back in about 2006, I did a project for a client which was doing a telepathic remote viewing interview of various ET races. And we also did some site visits to some of the off-planet locations, which is sort of unusual.
Does that answer your question, David? Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great. Actually, I know about those sessions that she's referring to, and I was wondering if there was in the interviews that you did with the ETs, was there one specific race? And I've seen your list and your description of them. Was there one particular that really sucked you into your session, the one that was a really profound race that kind of you'll always remember that particular race?
I like the Nordics. They seem very allied to us as humans, and I liked that they were like us but not like us. I really enjoyed interviewing them. Some of the others, like the reptilians, I didn't enjoy interviewing.
Thank you so much.
Great stuff. I haven't got any questions yet in the chat. Someone's put there, where can we find these interviews?
Okay, they're documented in a book I co-wrote with C.B. Scott Jones called Voices from the Cosmos. Or I can send you, if you email me, I have an Excel file of all of the pertinent information from the ET interviews that I can email to you. So, and that's freely available to anybody that emails me.
Excellent. Yeah, and the book's available on Amazon, isn't it? And is it available anywhere else, Angela? On all the books?
I don't know, because if you go to Amazon, the first copy you'll find is from the publisher, which is Headline Books. But if you go to the secondary sellers, you find Mindwise Consulting there, and I send out some signed copies from time to time. It's very difficult sending them to the UK now, because it's prohibitively expensive, and it has to go through customs and everything. So everything's more difficult this time.
Always the way, isn't it? We always get stuffed in the UK.
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if there's any more in the chat window here. Someone asked for an email address. Well, what we'll do is we'll add all Angela's details to the chat window through the night if anyone needs all the website address and her email address and everything. And someone's just posted up the link to Amazon there as well if you want to go there and get the book.
Excellent. And I wanted to say a shout out to Julie, because I was supposed to go over to the UK in September, and was going to go to the RV UK conference in London, which of course is now next year. And then I was going to go up to Nottingham and do courses there with Julie and Stella Webster, and do some RV courses. But that's now postponed again till next year.
Yeah.
Which is disappointing, but it is.
It's a tough old year for conferences this year, isn't it? All
right.
Around.
We just had our IRVA 2020 and did that virtually, and it went very well.
Yeah.
I'm very happy with it.
I didn't go along to the talks, but I paid for it, and I've got access to the talks, and I've watched half of them so far.
Oh, good. Yeah. And they're going to stay up now, I think, till the 15th of September.
I did see that today, yes.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
Good. Yeah.
So, Angela, I gather you've started teaching a bit online, and just wondered how that was all going.
I haven't done the first one yet. I had one scheduled for the end of August, but then people started signing up for the one at the beginning of September. So I'm not going to do the August one. So the beginning of September, the first weekend, is the first one. So this will be a big experiment, a big exploration.
Yeah, I think the whole world's going online now, so it's good. It's good.
And I think it's going to be quite a different way of teaching, but also hopefully remote viewing sort of has that already. It's just yeah.
Yeah. I think it's going to be fine. In fact, it'll be easier for me because normally I have 3 to 4 people here around for 3 days, and going out for lunches and socializing as well as teaching. And this way, I'm going to do it in chunks through Zoom, and then they get some downtime, I get some downtime. So I think it's going to work. And I'm going to record the classes as well.
Great stuff. Okay, we've got some questions. Someone wrote here, Mike says the book's interesting. I was wondering if Angela has communicated with any of these beings more since working on the book project.
Not in any depth, just occasionally for a few folks. I've been on a few field trips with some folks that I can't tell the stories yet, eventually. And I'm very, very interested in Earth-based ET groups. And I would really love to meet some of them in a very diplomatic and respectful way, because they are here hiding in plain sight, basically. And I think I've met some of them, but you know, and they're very human looking, they're like us. So I don't really haven't met any that. Oh, actually, I have. Come to think of it, can I tell you some stories?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, there is a hotel in Boulder City, Nevada, where I live, and you can probably tell from the little bit of a American twang in my voice. I've been here longer in the States than I've been when I lived in England. There's a hotel, and was associated with the formation of the dam, Boulder Dam. And after swimming, a friend and I used to go and have breakfast there. And we often met pairs of individuals, I'm going to say individuals, who were not us. And I'll tell you about one of them, one pair. And they usually came in at odd times. There was no preconception of anything coming. This couple walked in, two short people, and the woman was perhaps under 5 foot, and just she was very rounded, and her face was very frog-like. That's the only way I can describe it. Very friendly, and they went and sat down, and she asked us, like, do you often eat here? What kinds of things are good to eat? What do you recommend? And but the gentleman that was with her, who didn't speak, was about 4 foot, fully clothed, hat, scarf, sunglasses, gray skin, pinched little face, gloves, shoes, completely clothed, didn't speak, didn't smile. And it was as if the woman had a telepathic link with him, because they sat down together against the wall. And whenever we asked her a question, like, where are you from? She looked at him, I assume it was a male from the clothes, and then she would give us an answer, but it wasn't, like the answer would be like, well, we're not from around here, you know. And it was a fairly amicable interaction. But I have the strong feeling that he was a gray. So I think I can say, I mean, it was not confirmed. And then afterwards, when Claire and I left, she said to me, what was that? So she was not into a lot of the things I'm into. So I have met very unusual people here in Boulder City, but not on a purposeful project, just in passing.
Great stuff. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let me have a look at some more of these questions here. Helen says, I looked at your spreadsheet on alien types, but are you aware of any completely round, spherically shaped headed ETs? If so, might you know where they are from? Thanks. I listened to your marvelous interview with Jeffrey Mishlove.
Oh, thank you. And the answer to that is no. The ET groups that we interviewed were first dictated client. He asked me to interview the first 5, and he actual names of the groups that he wanted interviewed. And then we asked each group at the end of each interview, are there other groups that you recommend that we go and interview? So that was how it led. So there've been disappointment that we didn't perhaps interview the Pleiadians or some of the other groups, but they just didn't come up. And at the end of the year, because this took a whole year doing the groups that we interviewed, the client came under some surveillance, which freaked him out, because he hadn't been into this field before, and he started getting this interference. And he said, let's just stop doing the interviews and let's get back to business, because I was doing business RV for him. So I was like, okay. So really that year was a very big experiment, because it was something that neither of us had done in any great depth, me particularly. And so there are some groups, you know, I'd love to do this again at some point if I could find a sponsor. But, you know, you can't, I haven't interviewed them all, just the ones that were designated.
Yeah. And by the way, you know, any of you guys that are on video here, I can see all your faces. If you've got any questions, you know, just jump in. I know Russell had a big load of questions he wanted to ask at some point.
Okay, if Russell is not stating something, are you familiar with the Billy Meyer case?
Only from what I've read. And from what I've read, I feel that he had some genuine experiences. And, you know, there's been a lot written about him, both against and in favor of him. So, you know, I think it's strong evidence. But again, it's before my time, and all I know about it is what I've actually read.
Okay, because it's a bit difficult because we're now in this time, but what will happen to our experiences, or as your experience as remote viewer, for the future generations? How can we get that in a certain package or so that future generations can also learn from this and not think of it as voodoo or whatever stuff?
Right, yeah. And what I'm doing is I'm trying to lay a foundation of protocols and trying to do it scientifically when I can, and also trying to find feedback. And on Jeffrey Mishlov's show, he asked me about my own experiences, and I gave him some instances where I was able to find feedback for some of my experiences. Either other people had experienced the same thing as myself and my brother. I have some physiological ultrasounds, etc. So I think by providing scientific feedback and backup to experiences, that is going to be important for the future. But again, laying the foundation, because anybody can do what I did with the interviews, and I'm actually teaching some people to do that. There really is no way at the moment to get feedback, but who knows in the future? There may be feedback.
Thank you very much.
Angela?
Yes.
Angela, may I ask, do you think the aliens, so to speak, have an agenda for us? And if so, what do you think that agenda may be?
From the interviews, they basically said they're not here to save us or heal us. They consider themselves co-inhabitors, visitors to the earth. They've been here, coming here forever before us. And they consider the earth theirs as much as ours. So there really is no agenda. There's this idea that we're going to be facing this alien threat. That didn't come through in the ET interviews at all, about any threat or any way that they were going to interfere. I think in some individual cases, there have been some healings, there's been advice given from the ET groups to individuals and perhaps small groups, but there doesn't seem to be any large-scale agenda.
No. Did you get any sense or feeling that they are influencing the governments of the world?
Yes and no, because it depends which group you're talking to.
Yeah.
There are some groups that say, yes, they are there as advisors. They're very involved. They're embedded with government and in politics and science. They're very much on Earth as volunteers. If you go to any volunteer group, you might find one or two of them.
Yeah.
They're there as just living the life and being here on Earth.
Okay, thank you.
Angela?
Yes, hi.
So, hi, quick question. After I started with RV, some months later, I figure out that sometimes I was walking or driving and something really popped up. I turn around and catch this person, which had something in particular. They turn around, stare at you, and suddenly they went off, or they just keep staring at you. But sometimes I felt they were a little bit off. Would that be more in line with what you were saying, that they are amongst us and they're probably monitoring us?
Possibly. There is a known phenomena of staring, a perception of staring, and there's been research done by Marilyn Schlitz and others. I think she did that at the Institute of Noetic Sciences, where they had some staring experiments from room to room, people staring at others on computers, and their physiological measurements. And there is an effect when somebody stares at you from behind or from somewhere that you're not aware of them, you physiologically pick that up. And that probably is a very primitive response from, I don't know, way, way back. Whether you're actually picking up an ET, Earth-based ET, that's hard to say. It's what you sense. Did you sense that they were different or they were other?
Well, in some instances, I really felt they were different. And in one case, I was really scared, but no, like, conscious scare, just my body wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. And I couldn't find any way why that would be the case. The other curious case that happened to me twice is that I had a real strange dream. It was like real life, where these guys, these beings were there. Then I thought it was a dream, but the next day, talking to some of the neighbors, they told me, this was not a dream because I was there too, and it happened yesterday. So I was wondering, do they meddle with you so that you more or less have it more foggy, or it's a byproduct of whatever is going on?
Right, yeah, there are what I call interface experiences, either physiologically where you're actually there in person, or perhaps a mental virtual meeting. So those do occur. I wrote about my own experiences in Diary of an Abduction, which is now out of print. I'm in the process of putting that back up on Kindle, hopefully this weekend. And then I'm going to rewrite it and bring it up to date over this summer. We're almost out of the summer. So yeah, I've experienced that too. I've woken up and gone, wow, that was a weird dream. And then talked to other people and they said, did you have that weird dream? And we shared experiences and we were able to. I had one the other night where I dreamed of that I was doing something with a device that I had no idea of. It was I was with two human-looking men and doing something on like an iPad type screen. But I was told, no, you don't write with it. You don't use it as a stylus. It's an infrared pen. So I'm going, okay, and they showed me how to use it. So when I woke up, I went, well, that was weird. What is an infrared pen? Have you ever heard of anything like that, Daz? No, there are infrared pens. I went and Googled it, and there are infrared pens. And they're used very much like a stylus. So where did that come from? Was I actually in an interface experience to get that information? So it's hard to say. I think it's very individual for each person to get to know what is for them a normal dream. I call it a normal dream because dreams aren't usually normal, they're odd. And what is a virtual dream or a memory dream. And then you can kind of learn to differentiate them.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah.
I got some more questions on the chat. The first one is from David. He wants to know if you're going to plan on teaching extended remote viewing to your graduated CRV students.
Yes, in fact, it's going to be a standalone class. And if you go to my website at Mindwise Consulting, you will find the schedule there. And I think the ERV class is going to be mid-October, the first one. And then, so I'm trying to do masterclass, the applications class once a month, and then either the XORV or the ERV class. Ah, Daz has got it. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
there's the schedule.
Yeah. And that gives you an idea of, and it's going to be very much along the line of my master classes, where I'll bring you up to speed with the various the techniques over the first 2 days, and then the third day we do an actual current modern question, something that's happening in the real world. I'm not focusing on COVID-19 at the moment because there's so much front loading, but there are so many other, yeah, I mean, it boggles the mind. There's so much, but so I search out a relatively unknown but current and an enigmatic kind of a problem, like the Notre Dame fire. I had a French client who wanted to know whether that was accidental negligence or on purpose, sort of a terrorist related. And I gave that to my students. I was having in-person classes up till the beginning of the shut-ins. And they actually found that it was a combination of accidental and negligence. And that has since been confirmed through the French press. So that's what I do also with the ERV classes, but we focus more on doing ERV rather than controlled remote viewing.
Okay.
Excellent. The next.
Hi, Daz. I have a question.
Yeah, go for it.
Angela, in your research, do the ETs, when you're remote viewing, do they have any interest or curiosity about different groups of people, such as musician, artist, etc.? I find that my research has kind of found out that musicians have a lot of contacts. I'm just wondering in your research. Thank you.
Yeah, not necessarily from the ETs themselves, but from research, like you've probably done, which is, and that has to do with brain hemisphere and brain function. You know, the brain is divided into two, very simplistically, into two parts, the logical and the more holistic side. So artists, musicians, etc., tend to use more of the holistic parts of the brain. So I think it stands to reason that they might have more contact experiences. But I haven't done research on that. Okay.
Great stuff. Another question from the chat is from John. Why do these Earth-based ETs hide and blend in with society? What reason do they have to be unnoticed?
Well, considering that we are a very aggressive, xenophobic, you know, I could think of a lot of other words that we as a human race are not altogether nice. And so look at how we treat people from other countries, other races, other people who are not like us. We're very xenophobic. So it stands to reason that they want to be hiding in plain sight and to not be recognized as other or to be recognized as visitors.
I had a question on that. Seems like back in the past, with the work Farsight's done and everything, that one group of aliens would come build some complex like the pyramids, and who knows, later on another group would come and destroy it. So it seems like maybe the aliens don't get along all that well, fight amongst themselves a little bit. Yeah,
we found that in the ET interviews, that they weren't all compatible. There's something called as a general term, the Confederation. I'm sure it is much more complex than that. But there are people some of the ET groups that belong to the Confederation and some who don't, and some who don't like those who are in the Confederation because there are too many rules. I mean, it sounds very much like us in a way. But yeah, I know there's stories of alien battles in the sky that have been observed by Earth observers. On the whole, my feeling was the ET groups, the majority of them tended to tolerate each other, but there were others that were not very compatible with the others.
We just kind of wonder on if they're going to eventually get more involved with what we're doing here. You know, if it gets too far, I guess they probably base that more of how big of a threat it would be to the Earth or everybody else. Because obviously, if they do get involved, they can't really walk that back. So maybe that's probably why they're hesitant to do it.
I think there have been experimental sorties, people, you know, ET groups coming in and interacting with Earth-based. Do you know the work of Charles Hall? He was an airman who was stationed up at Creech what is now Creech Air Force Base. It was Indian Springs Air Force Base in central Nevada in the States. And they put him up there mainly as a guinea pig, you know, the Air Force. And his job was ostensibly to let off these air balloons to measure wind speed. Do you know Charles Hall's work? Daz? Yeah. And he's written several books, Millennial Hospitality. There's 5 books. The second book is the best book. And when he's up there, he starts seeing these strange white shapes, humanoid shapes out in the desert, because this is Nevada and it gets very hot most of the year and very cold for a very small part of the year. He's telling his superiors, I kept seeing these coyotes walking on 2 legs today. And they go, oh yeah, that's interesting. Well, did you go up to them? No, they were way out in the desert. And then he says, and there were then these very metallic, he says, I've got too much sun. I'm not taking my vitamins. I'm not well. I've been seeing these globular metallic shapes that are just riding above the top of the desert and riding along. And then suddenly they'll go very fast and disappear. He says, I need to see a doctor because I don't know what it is I'm seeing. And they're saying to him, well, don't worry about it. Just write it down, log it, what you're seeing. And then one day after a while, he had a theodolite. So he would let off the air balloons and then track them, the airspeed and their direction. And he looked around at one point and there were a bunch of tall white beings at his fence line. And he's writing in the book for that what he recollected was, oh boy, I've got too much sun again. But eventually he realizes that they are living beings. And he learns that the Air Force is actually put in there as a sort of a guinea pig because he's a very amiable, level-headed kind of guy, not easily spooked, to interact with them. And the whole series of books goes into how he gradually interacts with them. There's fascinating reading if you can ever get hold of the books. And the Millennial Hospitality too, as a paperback, and it's I consider that the best book. You should start with 2, go back to 1, and then work your way through. So these tall whites, as they came to be known, are very highly intelligent, highly technical, skilled, and he learns about them and writes about them. But he didn't write about them until decades later, and he was going to write about them as a novel. And his wife said, well, you've always talked about them as if they were real. And he said, yes, they were real. And she said, well, you should write your books about how real they are, how real they were. So that's how the Millennial Hospitality books came about. And I have a feeling I have seen people that I could perhaps classify as tall whites here in Nevada. But again, I don't want to be breaking their, sheltering in place kind of deal. I don't want to go up to them and say, hey, are you a tall white? It could be rather embarrassing. So I just treat them with great respect and great compassion and don't out them.
And he also claimed that we were manufacturing parts for the spacecraft. Didn't he? They used to come here for repairs, and we would
right. Yeah, and I have a feeling they probably still do. And there are people that I've talked to in Las Vegas who actually met them in the casinos in the early days, in the 60s, 70s. So they were coming into our civilization.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Should know, like, about, which seems odd if these aliens have lived here. I'm just thinking how we generate a lot of waste, like landfills, and there's no alien dumps, there's no alien empty beer cans or anything around. So I wonder how they handle that. Just
I think they assimilate, and they probably have the same beer can, troughs as we do. And the tall whites that Charles Hall was talking about were way out in the desert, in a very, very secluded and isolated area. So who knows? They may have learned to deal with waste, which we haven't yet.
Okay, another question from the chat is from Pablo. He says, do you believe they usually clear our minds after an encounter?
Possibly, but there is bleed through, because many people have residual memories of the encounters. So I don't think there's a complete clearing.
Makes sense, yeah. Because we do get a lot of people report, what we call classical abductee events, and not all of them are mistaken, but a lot of them are kind of shielded behind mirror memories, aren't they?
Right. Yeah.
Okay, another question from the chat here. Let's have a look.
I'm happy to talk about regular RV too, as well as the ET stuff is a very tiny part of my work.
A lot of these questions do seem to be alien related.
Okay, we'll go with it.
I have a question that isn't about aliens.
Okay.
It is weird though. I think it might have been your recent interview with Jeffrey Meshlove, or I've heard you mention at some point that it may have been the same client that kicked off the whole alien interview thing. You were looking at other non-physical entities and things which some people regard as mythical. Can you talk about that at all? Because I think it's not published anywhere.
Yeah, when we did the year-long interviews, there were other interviews with Devas and who we called the record keepers, etc. That I'm going to put into another book later this year called Shaman. But those are still in my computer files. And they didn't make it into the Voices from the Cosmos first because of limited time, and first because it was the client what the client wanted, and he was directing what went into the ET files, and they stayed in my computer for 7 years, because after his scare, he said, just hang on to them in your files. But eventually, he retired. He sold his businesses. He came back and then passed away. So I felt it was okay. He told me at one point that I could do what I wanted with them eventually. So that's how they got into the book. But you're right, there were interviews with a lot of other non-human entities, many of them earth-based and very ancient, that are here and are there to be interviewed, to be interacted with.
Was the experience of interacting with them different in any way from doing the ET ones? Could you feel a difference?
Very much so, very much. The ETs were very different. I had to really be very factual with the ET groups. And sometimes there were answers to some of my questions and some of the clients' questions that I didn't understand. And I had to ask clarifying questions like, what do you mean by that? With the timekeepers, the devas, etc., they had very different feels to them. The timekeepers or the gatekeepers, they changed their names sometimes, but I think it was the same group. they just had factual information. Their job was almost like to keep the matrix, keep the Akashic records. That was an older name for this sort of vast experience of information. That was their role. They were the gatekeepers, the timekeepers, but they are there to answer questions.
Oh, I look forward to reading the book.
Yes, I've got a couple of books in the pipeline.
Thank you.
Angela, may I just ask about those gatekeepers?
Yes, yeah.
In the world of ITC, instrumental transcommunication, there's often talk of a technician or a librarian that actually controls what information is allowed to be passed over. Did you find that during those communications at all, or is the flow of information unrestricted?
For me, it was unrestricted. There didn't seem to be any other entity or prohibition from the information that was being given to me.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so another question from the list here is Cedric asked, how did you do the interviewing? Is there an RV way of conducting the interviews, or was it something like automatic writing?
How I did it, because I had to develop a protocol, because there is no real protocol for, how do you talk to the ETs? So the client and I had talked about it, and a very wise man, very knowledgeable man. And he said, well, we go as the human race out into the jungles, out into rural areas, and we conduct field experiments where we interview indigenous races and others. And there are set questions out there. There are questionnaires out there for this type of interaction. Now, it's not exactly specified for ET races, but it's a start. We could start there. And then he also provided a list of questions that he was interested in. So combined those into a written questionnaire. So it was basically question 1, question 2, question 3, and then these, so which were the client's questions, and then all of these sociological questions that you would ask of a group that were not in our modern society. So I would write these up, first of all, have them on my computer. And what I decided to do was to use a variety of extended remote viewing, which was using stream of consciousness, but with eyes open, and telepathy. Because I know there have been times, when I've had experiences of telepathy. And I would sit in front of my computer like I'm doing now, and I'd have the questions on the screen. I would clear my mind of everything else as if I was going to sit down and do a remote viewing session. And I say to myself, usually, I know nothing. That's my cool down for doing RV, because I don't want my logical mind to kick in and start trying to tell me stuff. So I, which is my ego, knows nothing. And then I'd say, like, for the first one, is there a tall gray out there that would like to talk to me? Feeling very foolish, very skeptical, and like, well, this is a load of rubbish. But then I started getting responses, and I was typing them into my computer. Very focused, very calm, but not in trance. I was not in a trance state. Just asking the questions, getting responses, and writing them down. Some of the responses were very different from my own beliefs. For example, the Greys think that abductions are beneficial for humans. And I don't think that at all. So as I was writing it down, I was thinking, well, that doesn't make sense, but I tried to be very factual, as if I was conducting an actual interview of an individual and trying to record their responses as factually as possible. So I did that for each of the ET races.
Angela, did they say why the abductions would be beneficial? Because for most of the abductees, that would be a case to be argued, I think.
Yeah, very much so. Well, they consider them beneficial because, first of all, they're doing them. And they consider themselves doing us a favor by taking us and learning about us, and also that they're creating hybrids. The majority of the hybrids are gray, human, and the Nordics, sometimes putting in a little bit of the reptilian, but I think that's pretty rare. And what they said was they were creating ambassadors. Some of them came back down to Earth as hybrids. Others went out all across the cosmos as explorers. So that was their rationale.
Yeah.
Of course, there's no way to validate any of this.
Yeah, we have no way to know if they're
No,
lying or exaggerating, because
right.
I mean,
And I think they do lie at times, but it's hard to
yeah,
differentiate when they're lying and when they're telling the
because
truth.
the abductions, if you look through folklore and stuff, it could have been a phenomenon that's been going on for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
So how much time do they need, and how many people do they need to abduct?
I know.
Yeah.
And
Carol.
their opinion of us is not great either.
Yeah.
You know, they don't think we're up to our full potential yet.
Yes.
And I agree with them.
Yeah. I think someone's got their hand up in the chat thing, and Ned M's got his hand up. Ned, do you want to ask? Is that because you want to ask a question?
Bill's got his hand up.
I'm not very familiar with this Zoom. I'm wondering if you have, or anybody has, any remote viewing session regarding China's aggression in the South China Sea, and it's kind of very tense lately, or what might be the outcome?
I haven't done any. I'm usually only I am given those kinds of targets occasionally, but I haven't done. And again, I'm pretty front loaded, so that might not work. You might want to look at some of the other ET group, remote viewing groups. Who would you suggest, Daz?
My group, Crypto Viewing, has looked at it, not purposely, but some potential China aggression war scenario type data has come up in RV sessions when we're looking at future news events. But it's not something we've expressly targeted. It's just occurred. More so from one of our viewers called Hitomi, who is Asian herself. So I think she picks up on that type of data a bit more, because it is a bit more relevant for her.
I see. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no worries. A question on the chat, because we got quite a few to go through there, is from David again. And he said, have you ever been tasked Sasquatch? And if you did, can you describe the session or anything?
Sasquatch has kind of come into a few of my remote viewing sessions, but weren't tasked. The remote viewing sessions weren't focused on them, but they kind of intruded. So there were a couple of where, the information would come in if I was doing a CRV session, and I would just be writing down what I was perceiving, and then I would get something come in about Sasquatch, Bigfoot. I would have to put it off as AOL, because it wasn't to do with, what I was getting. So it was sort of an intrusive kind of information. So I've never been tasked purposefully on Sasquatch. So I can say, no real information.
Just as a note, Angela, as we're going along here, I think you're typing at the same time, and the microphone's picking up quite loud.
Okay, I'm going to push. I'm not typing actually, but I'm very close to my keyboard.
Okay. It sounds like someone's typing, yeah.
And I was maybe doing that with my hand. Yeah. Okay.
Let me ask. Does anyone want to ask any questions, or should I go back to the list here?
I've got a quick question for Angela. kind of going back to the ETs, I'm kind of curious with these the ones that look human. I'm kind of curious, is that their actual form or is that just what we see? And the reason I ask that is because I just find it very fascinating that whenever there's a depiction of an human-like ET, they're always Caucasian or, blonde and tall and attractive looking. Why is that? Why aren't there like African black looking ones or, Asian looking ones? I'm just
There
kind of
are.
curious about that.
There
Okay.
are. I think there was one group called the Duvel that were very dark hair, almost Asian or Native American looking, and others that were, of course, very, very white, such as the Nordics. But there are ET groups that look like other races.
Is that why we have different races here on Earth, or is it because they left? Okay, so that's our origins. That's why we have different races here.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know all the answers.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious which one came first, whether we came up with these different races here and we left, or whether they brought these different races here. I think that's kind of fascinating to think about.
Yeah, yeah. And some of the races, such as the Nordics, are able to, they called it translate between different bodies. Because one of the questions we asked was, do you have anything as we have, such as death? And the Nordic said, no, we just translate into another prepared body. So,
fascinating.
So there are levels, there's sort of linear translation, and then perhaps there are other races that are similar to human races. Yeah.
I think Bill's got his hands up. I think he wants to ask the next question. Go ahead, Bill.
Not so much of a question, it's a comment that some might wonder, well, why wouldn't the aliens want to speak to Angela? Well, I'm thinking who would be nicer to speak to her than her? She's so nice.
I'm not as nice as you think I am. I think because of my early training as a nurse and social worker and researcher, and then into consciousness research, I think I've had that background that prepared me for this kind of work, not deliberately, but over the years I've gone through those different trainings, and that really does help you to be more compassionate and understanding and perhaps accepting of others.
That's what we all do.
Yeah.
Why?
Go ahead. If you've got a question, please go ahead.
Thank you. Angela, a quick question. Do you think they have some kind of RV that is way more developed than ours?
When we think of RV, there's so many definitions. So, RV is based on our own natural intuitive ability. That was when Ingo Swann started doing his work, he based it on an out-of-body experience, ESP, and then it was gradually developed over the years into certain protocols that we now consider RV. I think that they definitely have abilities that are not as developed in us. For example, telepathy. There seems to be a great deal of telepathy, particularly in the hive-minded groups such as the Greys. The Nordics seem to have a lot of very advanced abilities to be able to translate from one place to another into different physical forms. So I think they probably are more advanced in what we call RV now, which is the modern term for all of these very ancient skills and abilities.
Thank you.
A question from James on the chat is, what has been your most impactful RV experience so far?
Oh, wow.
That's a hard one.
There's so many. I think the most recent one was last year, and at the end of that, I was dancing around the room when I got the feedback. A student of mine and I were tasked through a colleague about a missing girl down in Mexico. This is the most recent one that comes to mind. They had people on the ground. They had a team on the ground there that kind of knew where she was, but they couldn't find her. They'd run out of options. So they were reaching out to the remote viewers to try and find some more clues, because remote viewing doesn't always give you the whole picture, but it will give information that can be added to what's already known. And then there's that aha moment of, okay, we know. And the student and I did our individual sessions. We sent the information to the colleague, and the information was basically in water. There was some kind of vehicle that went under the water as well as on top of the water. There was a lot of information in there, which I thought was, sometimes I'll look at my sessions and go, what a load of rubbish. You know, but you send it off to the client, and very often something in there will go, it'll trigger that aha moment. And our sessions together created that aha moment for the searchers, and they went, okay, we know where she is. And they went and found her and got her out and got her home. For me, when I got that feedback, I was elated, and I was jumping around my apartment going, yay, yay, yay. Because that's very exciting when that happens. It doesn't always happen. But that's one of the ones that has stuck with me, that we saved her life.
So, Angela, when you did that, was that a blind task, or did you know that you were looking for someone that was missing?
We had some minimal front loading, which is allowable in some operational court cases, so that you're not wasting time, you're not chasing information that's already known. We knew it was just a missing person, and they had the team on the ground. They'd run out of resources. That's all we knew. We didn't know location or anything else. And when the student and I went in, we got very similar information and just pulled it, not knowing what we'd got. And I didn't think I'd got anything at all. But when we sent it off to the colleague and it got sent down to the people on the ground, they knew where to go look for her. So, yeah.
And did you do that with a monitor or just without a monitor?
No, I do most of mine solo. I don't have the luxury of a monitor.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to have a monitor, you know, but very often I just have to be my own monitor. And I've done so many sessions that I really don't need a monitor to keep me in session.
Yeah. So when you say that, how do you see that a monitor changes what you do in any way?
A monitor, well, the role of a monitor is to keep you in structure and to say, okay, now you've got enough stage 3s. Why don't you go on now to stage 4? And you're starting to name some things, some tangibles. Let's go into stage 4. And a monitor is really very helpful for people in the beginning stages. The monitor may or may not be partially front loaded, but if they are and they know sort of what it is you're looking for, vaguely missing person, they can actually say, okay, they can intervene with some movement exercises, move to the location where you described a biological, and tell me more about that biological and that biological's location. So that the role of a monitor can be helpful in that respect, to point the viewer in the direction for more information.
How's an experiment set up for something like that where you're searching for someone?
Sorry, I'm still exploring as to the benefits, and I know it's helpful to work with and without a monitor, so it's still interesting. I think however experienced you are, it can help in some circumstances, but other times you're fine to work without one. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
well, I've done everything from double blind, research type, very strictly controlled remote viewing, all the way up to more esoteric, shamanic type, out of body experience, non-blind, you know, fully front loaded. And I would say that for me, it doesn't seem to matter. I can most times get something.
Wow.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I've never
Hi, Marcus.
had a monitored session myself in 24 years.
Yeah. Yeah, it can be a hindrance, because I know there was one research week where I took part, and I had a monitor, and the monitor was, they're going, you don't need a monitor, you're going. I was just going. So, yeah. Marcus, I think, had a question.
Yeah. When I learned my first remote viewing style, we had a very close relationship between monitor and viewer. So the monitor was, when you got to stage 4, asking really questions to the viewer, and the viewer could answer them. So
yeah,
he could really pinpoint down on the topic he want to know, and therefore you can be very efficient regarding time. Yes. So it works. Yeah. Also, when it comes to interviews, the monitor can be the interrogator, so to speak, and the viewer is then the conductor, just to give you the answers. So it can be very efficient indeed.
Yeah, there was one situation where we were in that kind of a situation. I went over to Delaware on the east coast of the US, and took part in a week's session, a week's group with a group of healers, and we were using remote viewing to access illness in people. We had a doctor who was the head of the group. We were all in this lovely old house, and it was an ideal situation for doing that kind of work. So my role was to bring these healers up to speed with enough remote viewing to be able to, or CRV, to get some information, non-linear information or linear information. And so when the viewers were being tasked, and they were being task blind, they had no idea. They knew that this was a patient. There was a patient that they were viewing, but they had no information. The only person who had the information was the doctor in charge of the group. And there could have been some telepathic overlay, perhaps. We're picking up stuff that the doctor didn't even know. And in stage 4, there's a place in the AI columns where you can act as questioner and find somebody at the target site to ask questions. And when I was working with a monitor, because I was also one of the viewers, it was very helpful. And Marcus, that kind of experience happened where the monitor was asking, well, what about this? What about that? And then I was tasked almost as if I was the patient, and giving information then to the tasker, to the monitor, which is something I really hadn't done before. So I can see that that could be a beneficial relationship between monitor and viewer.
That leads on to a question that's in the chat, really. Someone's asked, have you ever remote viewed people with a mental disorder such as OCD or schizophrenia, or someone with mild or severe depression, or an irrational phobia?
I haven't. I try and stay away from very personal types of projects. For example, if someone contacts me and says they want to know about their future and their career path and their health and their relationship with their doctor, I politely decline, and I tell them I'm not a psychic. I'm not. I don't do that kind of work.
Yeah, I get about 10 of those a week.
Yeah, then I have to explain to them what I do, what I don't do.
It does take a lot of time up. I get a lot of those, and I get a lot of, will you help me find my cat or car keys?
I don't do those anymore either, the pet ones.
I get a lot of those as well.
Yeah, and then I get a lot of cold cases. My father left us when I was 3 years old, and we're now trying to find my father.
Yeah.
We kind of know where he was, and there was a police investigation, but it went cold. So there's so many of them that I don't do cold cases anymore, unless it's through like if they've opened up the case and it's now a fresh case again. But I work mainly on current urgent cases.
Yeah.
Such
Yeah.
People missing children as well.
I think it ought to be that everybody's worried about what's the future. Am I going to do this or that? Just if you're not happy in your current situation, you're probably not going to be happy in the future either.
No, no. And as you're right, because in those kind of situations, you can remote view for them. But are you, there are multiple futures. So are you remote viewing a potential future? And the future they kind of expect, want from what you're telling them isn't what they want. And they can get quite angry. I don't know if you've had that, Daz, where you've kind of given in and, done a little bit of that work, and then you give them what you've got. And they go, no, that isn't what I wanted.
Yes. Yeah.
That's not what I see. Yeah.
You have to be very careful. But yeah, I try to handle those cases off to other people now. There's just too many, and it's not the kind of thing that I want to do really in that kind of work.
Yeah, yeah. So I try to be selective because there are just so many. Because I've been on some of the media, interviews like with Jeffrey Mishlove and a few others. People now think that they can contact me and I know everything. I'm like the Matrix, and I have to tell them I'm one woman. And I've been doing this a long time, and I've got fairly skilled at it. But I have to be very selective in what I take on.
If people just say, why don't you just be nice to everybody, then things will get better. That's all you really got to do. I mean, it's pretty simple.
Yeah, I had a lady call me last week, in fact, in tears. And sometimes I'll talk to some of the people who have call me with a cold case. And one of the questions I ask of them, and this is one that Gail Husik also, does a lot of remote viewing applications, is if I give you information, do you have the resources and the contacts and the availability and the time and the resources to go and follow up on this information? And they say, no.
Yeah.
And I say, well, without that, me giving you that information, if I were to find that information, it would not be worth it for you. And you would be just as frustrated, perhaps even more frustrated. So I have to sometimes be very frank with people and let them know that even if I was able to get that information for them, without all the resources and people in place and investigations in place, if it's a cold case, it's not going to get them anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. I've actually had to say the same thing to people as well. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, a question from the board then, from Ida. As a psychotherapist, those of us with RV training have quietly discussed psychotherapy and reptilians. What does Angela think or believe about that subject?
I mean, therapy with, I don't understand the question.
Yeah, I don't know how psychotherapy and reptilians goes together, but...
Is this people who've had reptilian interfaces or...
Maybe. If Ida's there, if she wants to say something, if she's got a microphone, I'm just trying to look for an Ida.
It's me. I'm right here.
Hi there.
No, psychopathy. Psychopaths.
Yeah.
The psychopath behavior, like Robert Hare's PCLR, where you can go through with behavioral analysis and from however far back you can go in their, quote, lifespan, examine what if they have, quote, a soul or emotional being at all. Psychopathy. Are you familiar with it?
Surface wise, I would not want to go back and do anything like that with a reptilian, because I had the encounter with them when I was interviewing them, and I really had to push for responses from them. And they are very cold and very calculating and very single-minded, and they don't balk at being aggressive with humans. But people who've had experiences with them, that might be interesting in helping them come to terms with what they'd encountered.
Your description is right on with the definition of psychopathy.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Another question from the board is for Angela. Did you ever see someone transition through a death experience?
Yes. Yeah, because as a nurse, I was very much involved with patients who were passing, dying. And my first experience of death came at 19 when I was a student nurse. And I was on night duty, and we had a patient that was dying, and the family were on their way in. And so part of my job was to go in and check on this elderly gentleman. And he was very peaceful and very quiet, and he wasn't talking. And a lot of the patients that I come in contact with in the UK, and this was back in the 60s, 70s, very often will go into coma before they die. And then they'll maybe have a period of lucidity where they'll just awake and be with us for a while and then pass. And that sort of occurred with this gentleman. He didn't say anything, he just looked at me and knew that somebody was there with him. That had a big impact on me. And then he passed. And I was very religious when I was in my teens and 20s. I'm not so much now. I think of myself spiritual. I know that's a hackneyed phrase. But I stayed with him. And then when I came out, the senior nurse said, well, we have to get him looking nice now for the relatives, because the relatives are on their way. So we went in, and what we called it was laying out the patient. And there are certain procedures. We had to wash the patient, shave him, put his dentures back in. This was with a dead body, and I was 19 years old. But I had a wonderful senior nurse with me who was teaching me. And it was amazing. And from that point, I lost all fear of death. And, there were other occasions. So that was that very elderly gentleman. And it was his time. I think we all have an expiration date. And another time, I think that perhaps I healed a child and prevented a death, because there was a little baby from a gypsy community that was brought in, very, very sick. And the doctors had said, no, this infection is just too great. This child was about 6 months, 7 months old. And, we're going to have to find the parents and bring them in. And because in the UK then, the parents didn't stay with the child. It's very rarely. They were visiting hours. And so I was in charge of, looking after this baby. So I changed her nappy, her diaper, and made her comfortable. And I thought, this life isn't ready to go yet. I just had that feeling. So what I did was, and it was a very spontaneous thing. It wasn't anything I thought about. I got a little oil. It was the baby oil, and baptized her. Now, nobody else was around. If a senior nurse had been around, or a doctor, I'd probably have got into a lot of trouble. But I baptized the child, and I kind of held her, and I said, it's not your time yet. And that baby recovered. And by the time the doctor and the parents came back, this child was, not 100%, but she definitely turned a corner. So I realized at that early age that I had an ability to heal. And I use it very, very sparingly, because I don't think it's something that I don't advertise it. And I've probably let the cat out of the bag now. Yeah. But there have been occasions when I've done that. And I knew too, things that I'd always taken for granted, that I kind of knew what people wanted. When I was a nurse, if a patient rang a bell, and I would know, okay, they need a fresh jug of water. But I couldn't go in holding a jug of water. I had to leave the water outside, go in and ask them what they wanted, then go out and get the jug of water and bring it.
Yeah.
You know, it was really a learning experience on accepting my own abilities.
I think we all have to go through that one, don't we?
Yeah.
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 One of the questions from the chat on the side here is from Jules. She says, have you ever experienced bilocation through ERV or any other method? And would you care to share the experience?
I have. There's two kinds of bilocation. There's the more extreme one where you bilocate and somebody else can perceive you in the outer body state. I think maybe once or twice. And I think I saw my brother one time when he was out of body. But that is very, very rare. The usual bilocation is where you feel, you know, you're still in your physical body, but you're at another location and experiencing it as if it's real. And I've learned over the years to bilocate to a specific location and walk around and get the information I need, commit it to memory, saying, I need to remember this, remember this, remember this, bring it back, and straight away record it, usually in writing, what it was I was perceiving. And that's been very, very helpful. Now, in some remote viewing circles, such as the more orthodox CRV, I don't know if Daz is part of this mindset, but it's bilocation is discouraged because the idea is if you bilocate, you might stop objectifying, which is writing and talking. But if you have a good memory, you can actually bilocate, go around the location and look at what you need to look at, remember what you've perceived, then come back to not full consciousness, but enough consciousness that you can document and say what it was that you're perceiving. So I think it is a real ability, and it can be a very useful ability.
Yeah, I'm definitely of the other camp, but maybe that's because I've never had a bilocation experience. But maybe that might be because I am of the other camp. I don't know which comes first, the bilocation or the non-belief in it.
Yeah, yeah.
Angela, what
Yes.
happened to me when I was starting RV? I started with CRV, right? So there were a few occasions where I got a so strong signal line that I started bilocating. And
yeah,
you know, I even realized then later that I was no longer writing. I was like perceiving the sight. And I'm not saying like a complete visual. Yeah, but when I realized that the signal line like, you know, cut off, I returned to where I was sitting. And if I try to stand up, I will be, you know, all dizzy. And it took me around 10 minutes to get back to normal, right?
Yeah, yeah. It can be very confusing and very disorienting for some people. But I've been doing this since I was a child because I had out-of-body experiences as far back as I can remember, thinking that everybody did this when I was a child. I thought it was something like dreams, that everybody could go off flying around the neighborhood and visiting grandparents and other people's houses and going down by the fields and, you know, and I knew I wasn't asleep when I was doing that because I was, you know, I still had all my faculties. I was still fully conscious, but able to go with my mind. I could sit up on the roof and I would tell my mother and she'd say, oh, that's just your imagination. But then I tested it out and I asked a few people when I went to their locations, do you have this, this, and this at your location, at your house? And yeah. So over the years, I learned that when I was going out of body, I really was going to other locations and getting perceptions of these other locations. So for me, bilocation is nothing more than just going out of body.
Great stuff. Another good question from Kavan is, do you think there are certain substances in quote marks here, psychedelics or brainwave rhythms that will help you establish a direct contact with ETs?
Maybe not with ETs unless that's specifically what you're using it for. I think it can, there's some people that don't know, they don't have the pathways to experience these other locations, other peoples. And the remote viewing protocol kind of opens up those pathways. But some people prefer to use psychedelics and hemisync music or hemisync rhythms to open up those pathways. And when you go to do the hemisync training, which I did way back and I loved it, they do train you at the end to kind of let go of the actual rhythms and to use the memory of those rhythms and those pathways to get information. So I think those, I don't advocate people taking LSD, etc. But if they do, then they are, it's useful for some people that need to open up those pathways because they don't know how to get that information any other way. And once those pathways are open, I think you've got it. I mean, that's something you can use for the rest of your life.
Yeah, excellent. Any before we go back to the chat window, has anyone in the video window or any on the side got anything they want to ask?
I'd just like to ask a question, if I may have, Angela.
Yeah.
Angela, do you receive information via thought, or do you see imagery during your sessions, or anything else surrounding that? How do you receive your messages or your information?
When I'm in session and I'm deliberately trying to get information, it comes in mostly as cognitive information that I'm getting, and I'm recording and objectifying, getting more, writing it down. Occasionally there will be a visual, because I am a very visual person. And if I allow myself, then I can get off on a track, see if I see or perceive a shoe. If I allow myself to visualize, then I'm starting getting all these different kinds of shoes, which is AOL. I don't need that. So I got to keep myself very focused and controlled. That's why it's controlled remote viewing. But in my everyday life, I'll sometimes get a feeling. For example, a couple of years ago, there was an event in New York on Halloween where an individual rode a vehicle into a group of people, and it was pretty devastating. And that morning, I kept feeling so anxious and so out of sorts. And I'm usually a fairly level person. And I thought, what on earth is this? I sat down, I thought, okay, if I'm picking up something, what am I picking up? And I got Halloween Massacre. But I couldn't locate a date or time or a location. So sometimes I can pass on that information to people higher up that know, have avenues to pass on that information. This I didn't, because I had no idea where or when. I just knew. I just hoped it wasn't going to be Las Vegas again, because we'd had the massacre the year before in Las Vegas. But I just hope it's not Las Vegas. And then in the afternoon, I learned about New York and what had happened in New York. And I think I was picking it up precognitively in the morning. So sometimes that kind of information will come through, sometimes visually, sometimes just gut feeling of something wrong. There's something wrong. And I have to kind of figure out then, do a little bit of cognitive work and find out what it is I'm perceiving.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Daz, can I just mention that somebody, I'll come back to the questions again. You had actually picked up the Beirut bombing, is that correct? In one of your sessions?
Yes. Yeah.
I hate to put you on the spot, but I think it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, me and the crypto viewing guys, because on a monthly basis, and I think Farsight do the same thing, we try to predict the news a month ahead. But it wasn't part of that project where we did it. I can't remember what we were looking at. We were looking at a project last month for the crypto viewing people, and it was, I think, to look at a news event that would be covered by a famous YouTuber in some way. And yeah, it just came across that I had that the explosion in a port, in a city with a port, and the explosion was going to be, you know, in and around shipping containers and all that kind of stuff. And Edward had some great data as well. He had a building on fire, and he had that the city would start with the letter L. So yeah, we collectively we had some pretty good data on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
But we do get hits. You know, we got I think 5 remote viewers on the team now, and on a monthly basis, we put out between 10 to 15 predictive news events each. So that's probably 50 to 70 things we're looking at on a month by month basis. And we do get, I think we're running at something like an 80% of those coming true regularly month on month.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff. And I just posted one tonight as well, because we had a plane crash today as well in India, and my data was out slightly on it by a few days, but I had a prediction that I did in June for the end of July, saying that there was going to be a plane crash in a hot place, and it was going to break up, and it was going to skid, and all this kind of stuff. So I missed it by a few days, because, you know, that was meant to happen in July, and we're now in August. But yeah, I think that was a most probable hit on that one as well.
Was your group also not necessarily tasked, but got information about Malaysia Airlines, you know, a couple of years ago? Because I know there are a half dozen remote viewers who got very similar information.
I'm not sure. I've done so many targets. I think I might have done something for Courtney on one of them.
Yeah.
That was put out as a video for Farsight, but I can't remember which plane crash that was. I think that might have been the Malaysia one. I'm not sure, to be honest. You know, I do so many targets now, and it's so many years for me. It's hard. They all blend in.
Yeah.
It's hard remembering where one ends and the other one begins. But I did do something with Courtney, and he put out a video. It might have been that, or it might have been in the Egypt air crash or something like.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Well, there were about a half dozen of us remote viewers independently got information about the Malaysia Airlines, and what I perceived was it coming down on an island, not in the ocean, onto a runway, but skidded off the runway into a wooded area, and I felt it looked like sort of a tropical kind of island, almost Vietnamese-like, but it wasn't Vietnam, but that kind of tropical. And I tried to look inside the plane because it was damaged, and I couldn't feel any perception of people in there. So either they were dead or off the plane. So I couldn't differentiate at that point. Yeah. But it was definitely not in the ocean. It was onto land, onto an island. Okay. And but half dozen of us got very, very similar information independently.
It'd be interesting to see if we ever get any, you know, hardcore feedback on that and find it, because it's been a few years now.
Yeah. But the common perception is, or the common reason is that it went down in the ocean. But but the viewers have not confirmed that.
Oh wow! Yeah, I mean, when we ever do get feedback, that might be some great confirmation on that one then.
Yeah.
Okay, it's for Daz or for Angela. I'm wondering what is limited to perceive remote viewing? Is it only to humans, to spiritual beings, or may also in the future computers do the task of remote viewing?
That's interesting. Yeah. Do you want to take that one, Daz?
I mean, I know there are systems out at the moment, AI systems that are doing. I mean, I wouldn't class it as remote viewing, but they are doing what they call predictive forecasting. I know that there are quite a lot of the modern police forces that have computer systems that run on algorithms that look at human behavior, and it can accurately predict when the next crime wave is going to happen and where it's going to happen. But that's not intuitive in any way. That's just looking at data and then making analysis of it.
I mean, for example, to have a target number and do the same stuff and come up with the result.
It may be possible. I think you'd need a pretty a pretty big like computer. You need some kind of like quantum computer, and maybe if it's got a little bit of AI in there and it's sentient in some way and it knows that it has to go out and get information in that certain manner, it might be able to. So yeah, I think it's not possible right now, but I think it will be possible in the future.
I had hoped for that it would be more that something that has a life force or a spirit would be only accessing this, but
well, there is some research. Can I tell them about the random number generator work?
Yeah.
There is a device called a random number generator, or RNG, that can be impacted by human consciousness. And I worked at the Pear Lab at Princeton University as a member of staff for 5 years, and I participated in those studies. And it's true that over many, many trials, it's a small effect, but human consciousness can interact with physical systems, particularly if there's a random element, like a random number generator. Some people now, like Paul Smith and a few other folks, are now running random number generators during remote viewing sessions. And they found that in successful sessions, the random number generator goes non-random. That is, instead of trotting along a midline, it starts veering off into a non-random fashion. And so that's something I think that could become predictive, perhaps if you had a random number generator running and something. And, you know, Roger Nelson in Princeton has the Global Consciousness project going, and they've got random number generators around the world that are running continuously. And whenever there's an event that is, you know, like 9/11, for example, that created a huge diversion from the normal functioning of the random number generator. And I was actually at Roger Nelson's house with him and his wife. I just come back from the UK to the US, and I was staying with them a couple of days when 9/11 happened. And in the afternoon, Roger remembered he had his random number generator running in the basement. So he went down and we saw the trace. It started about 2 hours before the buildings fell. And it just went on a trajectory. Instead of going along, you know, an average line, and I'm trying to simplify it here, there's a lot more involved. It went non-random, and the line was just steep until it just crashed and came back to normal. And when they looked at the other random number generators around the world, that also had a very similar signature. So perhaps that can be used. Roger says it's not enough to use it in a predictive way now at the moment, but perhaps in the future, that kind of technology can become predictive of something major happening.
Yeah. But does the data indicate at the moment that it only goes non-random when the remote viewing is accurate, or
and where it's observed by human consciousness too?
So you can do a test the other way around, that if you have a kind of conscious computer influencing random generators.
Right. Well, they did try that in at Pear. They had John, one of the technicians there, was building shoebox random number generators. And I actually got one of those that I used in my PhD dissertation research, borrowed it. And they put them in a line to see whether they could synchronize. And they actually didn't. So perhaps they were too primitive at that time.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I've done so. I only did one experiment with a random number generator. I was RVing a project for a guy called Andrew Usher, and he lives up in Scotland, about 300 miles away from me. And at the time I was doing the RV session, his random number generator did go non-random, and I was getting good target contact on that RV session. But we only tried it the one time.
Yeah, you need many, many sessions. Over the 5 years I was there, I did about over 60 sessions. And I was one of the I'm blowing my own horn here, but I was one of the more successful people in that research.
It's definitely something to look into. You used to be able to buy random number generators online. I think they call it the cyclotron or something
Right.
like that.
Yeah, they were putting out, they were selling it. But you've got to be careful because there are, there's random and then there's random. Some of them are cyclically random. So you've got to have, Per was very specific about calibrating the hell out of these machines so that they knew they were random. They did, continuous tests on the random number generators that were being used at the lab. And to make sure that they were running randomly, and they were doing, baselines as well as intentional runs. And so there are some that are run from a computer seed number. Those are not always truly random. So the ones at the lab were as close to true random. And they also used the tripolar protocol where each attempt was done in 3 sessions, one running a baseline, one trying to get more ones from the random number generator, and then another 3rd session where you're trying to get zeros from so making it run higher or lower. And the baseline was there as a control.
Yeah.
And that was very important to have that baseline.
Yeah. It's very interesting stuff, isn't it? It just goes to show we still need huge amounts more scientific research to know where we're going with all this.
Mm-hmm.
It's just getting the funding. I have a question for you.
Right.
You worked with you did some work for I think some project work for Bigelow Aerospace.
Well, it wasn't Bigelow Aerospace then. After Per, Per was going through some refunding, etc. And my position, I'd been there 5 years, and my position was no longer going to be funded. So I was then looking for somewhere to go and work. And I didn't want to go back into regular science. I was just, I tasted the magic potions, and I was doing all this psychic stuff, which was amazing. So I put out a lot of probes out into the world to see, what I could go and do. And I got contacted by a colleague who was working with Bigelow and said Bigelow is looking for a research coordinator in Las Vegas. Would you be interested? So I said, yeah, it sounds, I need to know more about what he's doing. And also I was getting a bit desperate by then because I wasn't getting anywhere with my other leads. And I was also doing my PhD at that time with Saybrook Institute in San Francisco. So I was going out from Princeton to Saybrook, doing, in-person courses and then doing the work back at Princeton. So at one time I was out in California at it was a party that was put on at the end of these teaching sessions, and a gentleman approached me and said, I've been asked to talk to you and interview you for a position with Robert Bigelow. So we sat out on the steps of this dance venue, and I got interviewed. It was the strangest interview I've ever had in my life. And he basically wanted to get to know me and if I was interested. And sure, thinking Las Vegas, what's there in Las Vegas for me? But I went out and spent a couple of years with Robert Bigelow and his Bigelow Foundation. I've actually written that up, all the work that we did together, and that's freely available too in a document if anybody would like to see it. One of the claims to fame is that we started, the radio show Coast to Coast that was run by Art Bell.
Art Bell.
We were the founders of that back in 92, 93. I think it was 93, July 4th of 93. And Bigelow had approached Art Bell and Linda Moulton Howe and George Knapp and a few other people to put on a bi-weekly radio show about anomalies. And my job was we called it Area 2000. And my job was to collect information on the internet. It was the bulletin boards then, if anybody remembers back that far. So on the bulletin boards, I would scour out all of these unusual UFO, alternative energy, alternative health, anomalies, parapsychological, human consciousness, anything that was interesting and new and that would interest people. So I got all these stories and and I recruited a whole bunch of folks to be interviewed on the show. So we had a lineup of folks. I think we eventually had, because we went 6 months, so we had a whole bunch of folks. And Colonel John Alexander was our first interviewee. And I know that because it was July 4th, and I went with my family at that time. We went out to fireworks, and I was there with a little portable radio and a headset, listening to the show while watching fireworks. But after 6 months, there was a lack of interest from Mr. Bigelow. I think he had some other ideas what he wanted to do with his time and money. And we stopped the radio show. I didn't. I still wanted to continue. I still had people lined up to be interviewed, loads of stories to follow up. But we stopped it. And then Art Bell, of course, then took it private. For that first 6 months, it was under the auspices of the Bigelow Foundation. But then he took it private, and that's where Coast to Coast emerged. So it started right there in Las Vegas. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's a good bit of history.
Yeah, and I have written that up.
How do you feel now? Well, I'm guessing that you've seen all the latest UFO information that's come out over the last couple of years about how Bigelow Foundation's been involved in that, and the Shoot for the Stars people with Tom DeLonge and How Puthoff and the others. Did you have any kind of influence or any input into any of that stuff that they were looking at? Because they've been obviously looking at this kind of stuff now. I think the emails go back well over a decade or more.
I've never been consulted on any of that personally, so I can't really say I've had any impact, but I have been following it, and I feel there's some. I have a colleague, C.B. Scott Jones, who is very knowledgeable. He co-wrote Voices from the Cosmos with me, and he said that, because I asked him one time, I said, when do you think disclosure is going to happen? He said, it's already happened. All we need now is confirmation.
Yes, yeah.
So that was, and I'm seeing that.
Yeah.
So if I know Hal Puthoff, and if he's involved with these efforts, then I have to put some confidence in it, because I have a lot of confidence in him as a researcher and as an individual. I think there are others in the field that are just chasing moonbeams.
Yeah. I mean, the interesting stuff that seems to be emerging now. We had the videos that came out a couple of years ago, the Pentagon videos. But what seems to be the new meta that's coming out from this now is that, and we know it comes from Bigelow, is that he has, and they have, and they've kind of openly said this now. They have metal and they have physical.
Well, that's been known for decades.
Yeah, it's been known, but to see the people, see the actual people in government now talking about, admitting
that's different.
It's quite, I think that's quite a big step forward for us, really.
Yeah, I wanted to mention too, a few years ago, year before last, we had a conference. It was the Remote Viewing Conference, IRVA, in Las Vegas, that we also shared with the Society for Scientific Exploration. And as a group, we got invited over to the Bigelow headquarters in North Las Vegas. That was like something out of science fiction. We had to be vetted to go in.
Yes.
And when we drove up in buses, there were guys with like armor and weapons and razor wire on wire, and inside you walk in, they take you into the cafeteria first, And Bigelow remembered me, which I was amazed about. Yeah, it was Angela, yeah, which was I felt a great honor. And then we went after an introduction then around, we did touring groups around his facility. These pods that he's been developing are just out of this world. I mean, I have all the photos from that visit, and from single person ones to this gigantic one. They don't have a rocket big enough yet to take it into space, even though in its compacted form that they're now using as a conference room.
Yeah,
it's like 3 stories tall. Amazing, absolutely incredible. I believe there's still one in orbit, one of his pods, and they're expandable modules, and one is attached to the International Space Station.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know that. But they're like they're not solid material, are they?
They're layered expandables.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're multiple layers with multiple fail-safes.
And they are quite protective against fast-moving microparticles and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because if they get through one layer, there are certain other layers in between.
Very interesting.
They showed us these layers laid out on big tables. I mean, we didn't get any information about what they were, just the general idea that these were multiple layers, and they were designed specifically that if there was a breach, they could be automatically sealed.
Okay. And do you think, because there are allegations and rumors that some of what we call the meta materials from these UFO craft originated from Bigelow, do you think that maybe he's used some of that research in his constructions?
I don't know. I know that way back when I was working for him, we did know about locations, for example, up in, I think it was up in Mesquite. It's either Mesquite or Caliente, which is up in northern Nevada, central Nevada. That they had a big chunk of something that was discovered in a bar there on the top of a bar. And I actually went to go and see it when I was up there. And I don't know whether he came in after the fact, that he came into, that he got to have some of those materials, or to obtain some of those materials. I don't know, because when I left, I kind of didn't have any more contact with the organization.
Yeah.
And I know at the moment, because of COVID-19, everything's closed down. Everybody got laid off. Mr. Bigelow actually his wife has passed away.
Right.
And so I think he's probably going through a time when, perhaps reevaluation, who knows.
Yeah.
But it was an incredible visit.
It's all interesting stuff, isn't it? And all the key players in looking at the what I call the UFO situation are also the key players that, as we know, have been interested in remote viewing for decades as well.
Yeah.
It's good to see people like Scott Jones and How Put-Off and all those people very, very entwined in all this.
Yeah. And as I mentioned earlier, there are other stories that I will eventually be able to tell, but not yet.
That's a future book, is it?
That's probably 10 years from now. You just have to be patient.
Yeah. Well, I think the disclosure is definitely on its way. I think it's been a long time coming. I'm not convinced we'll ever get full disclosure though, because the technology seems to be so good that the craft are using, that I can see that there are races on this planet that would selfishly want to use it for their own ends.
Yeah. I came to a revelation one day, because we were told that here in Boulder City, that traffic was going to be stopped for a couple of hours, because they were going to be bringing a water container by loaded vehicle, big load, through Boulder City and down to the dam, where it would be put in place in a new water pipe. So I'd already seen these pictures of the Tic Tac.
Yeah.
You know, this the ET craft this craft that's made news. And so I didn't go uptown to watch it, but I saw there was streaming video of it on YouTube, not YouTube, on Facebook, from uptown. And as this thing came down the road, I was looking at it. I thought, that's a Tic Tac. It was enormous. It was maybe like 4 or 5 buses or more long, white, rounded ends, complete oval, huge. I mean, it was, I'm not very good at measuring, you know, estimating dimensions, but incredibly big, going very, very slowly with convoys of police cars, with the sirens going and protecting it as it went along the road. Then they had to take it down a very windy road down to Lake Mead. And then it was supposed to be put into a water storage area where they could store some water to prevent the lake overflowing or something, which is, the lake is down, you know, it's about 100 feet below what it should be right now. Mm. And I was looking at that, watching it on my computer going, what is that? Because it was just white, shiny, enormous, and just being carried on this big trailer bed with two kind of trucks ahead of it and 2 trucks behind pushing and pulling it. And, you know, that is an enigma. Mm. And then we learned afterwards, oh, it's been put in place now. It's, you know, it's sort of gone underground. And yeah. But I was left wondering, I wonder if what we saw was a Tic Tac. Who knows?
You never know, do you? I mean, you know, it would be easy to move things quite easily in plain sight like that, really. Yeah.
But that's what I was thinking. That was the revelation. You could move something, saying it's a huge water containment vessel, and you know, in plain sight. There was no secrecy about it. There was plenty of patrols there, you know, making sure that it moved safely and securely. So who knows?
It's an interesting world and an interesting time at the moment, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Have any of you guys got any questions you want to ask Angela here? Being rather quiet.
I've got a question, Daz, if I may. Again, sorry, Daz. The alien interview alleged story with the nurse Matilda McElroy O'Donnell, I think, or something like that. The alleged alien interview that took place at Roswell. Does Angela, is she aware of that? And does she have any views on the information that was passed over? Because there was quite a lot of claims made by this alleged alien regarding mankind, etc., how we came to be, and what their view was of the Earth. I just wondered if she had any views on that, if she's aware of it.
No, I'm not aware of it. I would need to go. What was the name again?
It was I think it was Matilda McElroy O'Donnell. It may be the other way around. It came out in a book called The Alien Interview. It's widely publicised on various websites, and I think it's on YouTube as well.
I'll have to go look at it. Yeah.
Matilda O'Donnell McElroy Alien Interview. She's an alleged nurse that was. There was apparently from the crash at Roswell. She was one of the nurses that.
Oh, I think I saw something on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Now you mention it. Yeah. But I'm going to go and take a closer look.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to say bravo, Angela.
Thank you.
I have a quick question, Angela, really quick. When you're doing a session, let's say you're doing a session on somebody in the past, just for an example, let's say you're doing a session on Hitler or something, and
Yeah.
you're probing their consciousness for answers, interrogating them type session, whether it be an extended or whether it be in a monitored session. Do you feel like you're having you're communicating in a sense? I mean, I know this is theoretical. I'm just wondering what your gut tells you. If you're having a conversation with their consciousness at that moment in time, or do you feel like you're communicating with their consciousness like outside of time?
When I do that kind of work, it really feels like I'm interacting with a real person. Because sometimes if I'm looking at a crime scene or an area where I need more information, and I use the AI columns to dialogue, I'll say, is there anybody here at this site that would like to talk to me? And there will be somebody say, I'll perceive there's a guy, and I'll say, are you willing, would you like to answer a few questions? And generally they go, no. You have to go.
Would you speculate that they're picking up on you, or do you think that it's
perhaps
maybe
on a subconscious level? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Angela, earlier you mentioned you were doing a remote viewing sessions for clients for his business or business purposes.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of curious, what kind of sessions or experiments do you set up with business owners to help them with their businesses?
Well, this particular businessman was going to work with a colleague of mine called Prudence Calabrese, and Daz probably is aware who that was. And she opted to leave the RV community for personal reasons. And she recommended me, and I had no idea who this person was. I actually met him because I was also recommended as to do a couple of workshops in London at something called the Field Conference back in 2003. And he told me he was a businessman in New York, and he was very wealthy, and he was willing to put some money into remote viewing to hire me, and also to hire some other remote viewers to do some work for him, some business consulting. Part of it might be evaluating new hires, or looking for some people within his company that were perhaps thieving, stealing, looking at a potential business that he wanted to buy, and looking at the business and getting information about the business. So it was multiple. I mean, I've got files full of stuff still.
Wow.
And as well as doing that kind of remote viewing, eventually after a few years, he decided to, he was going to sell his businesses. He actually had a chain of businesses. So I was remote viewing when he was going to have a group coming to do due diligence on his company. He wanted me to look at his company and see if there's anything that might cause a problem, and let him know beforehand. I would also, if he was going to an important meeting, he would ask me to remote view the meeting, to actually go to the meeting before him and perceive the major points, and if there was anything that he needed to prepare before. I know it sounds amazing, but this is what I did for him. He challenged me. He pushed the envelope of remote viewing. And the first thing he did when he would call is, I'm not sure if you can do this with remote viewing, but this is what I want you to do. So not only was I doing those kinds of remote viewing projects for him, he also had a lot of very personal interests, such as Atlantis. What and where and how about Atlantis? So I did a whole series of projects, and in fact, I'm one of the Jeff Mishlov's New Thinking Aloud interviews is going to be aired at the end of August, because I did an interview. He interviewed me about those sessions, because I've printed those up in a book called Tactical Remote Viewing. Not everything I did for that particular client, but everything that I was allowed to talk about. Also, he was interested in the Sphinx. What is there about the Sphinx? Are there other Sphinxes? Where are they? you know, the secrets of the Sphinx. So I did a whole bunch of remote viewing on the Sphinx. What else? So alternative health. He was very interested in longevity. So I did some non-remote viewing research for him on factors that assisted in longevity. And also alternative energy. I mean, you name it, he was interested in it. He was an enigmatic, amazing person. He also used me as a sort of listening post. He would call up and say, okay, I don't need any input here, but just listen. And he would talk for a couple of hours. Mainly, he didn't expect anything from me, to respond, but it was just to have somebody to bounce ideas off of. And he knew I was very discreet. I never discussed anything that we were working on, and he knew that, you know, the work that we did together was private. We were going to write a book together, but he passed away before he could do that. So now I'm doing that. I'm writing the books and putting out. But he said I could write about everything that we did apart from his name, his company's name, any of his family, any of his financial dealings, or anything very personal about the projects that he was doing. So everything else was fair game to write about. So that's what I've been doing.
Wow. So it sounds like some of the remote viewing work you were doing for his business, it's already front loaded. It's not blind, right?
It was partially front loaded because there was unknowns, and he would give me an idea, just a rough idea of what it was he wanted me to do, not how to do it. Like he'd say, okay, I've got a very important meeting tomorrow. Could you go take a look? You know, and then I'd put a session together. And a lot of those were done with ERV, extended remote viewing, stream of consciousness type of remote viewing, rather than, you know, than CRV. I rarely use CRV with his projects.
I see. Are you still doing projects like that for clients?
Yeah, when I get tasked.
Okay.
I never know what's coming across my desk, like probably the same with Daz. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'd love to be in touch and see how we can set something up. You know, I've got a small business and I'd like to experiment with remote view and see if that can, you know, help the business at all.
Possibly. Yeah. Yeah. I don't do ARV. Do you know what ARV is? Associative remote viewing, which is a
I'm
method to use remote viewing.
Yeah.
I'm so disillusioned with the current protocols that I don't do ARV. There's so many decline effects and randomizations introduced that, you know, I consider myself a good viewer, but I can do 15 sessions and get nothing with ARV.
It has its inherent problems. John Knowles is on the listing. He knows about them as well. He's a long-term explorer of ARV. We use it within crypto viewing, but we've been testing a method of ARV that comes from John really, called unitary ARV. Whereas there are two, you know, it's still binary. There still are two targets, but we only have one assigned photo target. So it's hopefully stopping them displacing to a second.
That's good, because that's how it was in the beginning with Halputov and Russell Targ. They'd give the viewer, they'd say, okay, you're going to, on Friday or whatever day they chose, you're going to be shown a picture or an object that represents the outcome of a particular event.
Yeah,
that's all sometimes they didn't even tell the viewer that. They said, what you're going to be shown on Friday, remote view it. Yeah. And then they would take that one viewing. That was the simplest and in my opinion, that's the most effective way.
Yeah, I'm getting good results with it, and I discussed this with John. The unitary approach, we still got some to come in because we got some to come in November, and we got some to come in 2, 3, and 4 years. So I can't count those, but the ones that have come in using the unitary approach, we have 100% on those. Yeah. But the standard binary ARV, where you have two photo targets, the accuracy rating on that is like something like 10 or 20% we were getting.
Yeah, Yeah.
Could I ask or make a point here, folks? Hi, Angela. Hi, Daz.
Hi, John.
So, Angela,
Hi.
I'm actually working on a book on ARV. I've been doing it for 15 years, ARV, along with a co-author. And I hadn't heard that Al Puthoff and Targ only gave a single target at the beginning. I thought everything I've heard that Stefan Schwartz invented it, it was binary, and it May was
Well,
involved
Schwartz
in
has
binary.
his own method. Yeah.
So if you have any documents that on that, I'd really like to see them about that original, because we're doing a whole book on this.
Yeah, I'll have to find. And actually, I had done back in, let me think, 87, 88. I'm trying to think of the year. I had done a couple of sessions for Russell Targ on ARV. And I think I still have those materials around somewhere. And that was just, you were shown one picture. So I'd have to look back at that and see what I have.
Well, if you have time to do that, I'd be grateful.
Yeah. I'm making a note. Okay. Yeah.
That session you did on the election, Daz, was that binary, or was that a one target session?
That was a one target deal. That was unitary, and on Trump, I did two different projects on that. I did a project within crypto viewing, unitary ARV. So there was one photo target and anything else that the viewers might want to see, and that came up that the prediction on that was that Trump would win. And then I did a separate project using a unitary approach as well, but using Facebook people that said they want to do it, just as a bit of fun. They didn't know what a project was in any way. And my analysis of their sessions separately indicated also that Trump would win in November. So make of that what you will at this stage in time. We'll have to wait and see, I guess. But yeah, that's an interesting one, because at the moment it's looking like he won't be, but who knows what the world has in store for us.
I have a question for you, Angela.
Yeah. Hey, Russell.
Hello. Have you ever or do you offer online monitoring sessions?
Yes.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yes, and I've done some with some of Paul Smith's viewers.
Is that service like on your website, or where could?
No, it's just privately offered.
How do I put someone? Because I've had several people ask, and I wanted to refer them to you. So, what is your preferred method of contact?
They can email me. It depends, though. I only monitor CRV people because I'm not knowledgeable of the other.
Yeah, these are CRV folks.
Yeah.
Okay. And also, just as an aside, I know I've said this to you privately, but I would say it in public. Angela was my very first monitor in person, a trembling, nerve-wracked beginning basic student. And I remember going into that little room and hands shaking, feeling sick, not wanting to fail your first session, and just her face, her smile, her calmness. And I did get my first stage 1 session correct with her. And the monitoring she offers is just amazing. I'll never forget the one thing where it was like a nighttime, and you moved me forward to see the scene during the day, and that sensation of suddenly being able to sketch. And so there are just so many tricks to the trade and experience. So if you ever do get a chance to monitor or have Angela monitor you, I highly recommend that.
And wasn't there also a time where I asked you to move aerially above the target, and you found yourself there?
Yes. No, I could go on with the list. I just was trying to keep it brief for once, but I'll never forget the calming of the fears and the going through the processes. And then you were my monitor on stage 2 and then stage 3 as well. But it was that very first session where all we did was the ideogram, the AB. And then, of course, when I, on the B, I wanted to get it correct. And I did. And it was just like, I don't know, that launched me in a direction that I'll always remember.
Good.
Was
I'm glad I
Russell a
was there for
troublemaker?
David doesn't know what he's talking about, everybody.
Oh. Yeah, I go and assist Paul Smith with some of his basic classes and meet the most amazing people and get to monitor them. And, I'm sort of a secondary monitor for Paul and sit in on the classes. And I love doing that. And of course, now because of the current situation, that's on hold. So we're not doing that.
Any of you guys got any more questions for Angela? Because we kept her here for over 2 hours at the moment.
Wow. Yeah.
I've just got
Angela, if we, oops, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
I guess I was just gonna ask, if we want to reach out, is the way to reach you on your website, Mindwise Consulting?
Yeah, Mindwise Consulting.
Okay.
.com, and then my email is mindwiseconsulting@gmail.com.
Yep, I see it. Okay, great.
Yeah.
And just a quick one from me, Angela, please, if I may. You've carried out remote viewing in the UK and the US.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel, is there any similarity between how you're received by the people in either country? Are we both as open-minded as each other? Is it as popular in both countries? And secondly, likewise, you said you've done cold cases. As a former police officer myself, would you say it's more accepted use in the States for law enforcement to use you than the UK?
Well, there's two questions. I'll answer them both. Yeah. The first one is the comparison between the UK and US. I've done the majority of my US, my remote viewing work here in the US. Yeah. The only time I did some work over there was in the UK. I went for 6 months, like 2008, 2009, to see whether I wanted to move back to the UK. And retire back there, and I found I don't fit in England anymore. No. Sad to say. I mean, it's still there to visit, and I love England as my home, but I've become too American, I think. Yeah. So I really don't have an experience of doing a lot of remote viewing in the UK. So I really don't have a comparison. Regarding the police, I've not done any work for the police in the UK. I have done a limited amount here in the US, and the general consensus is they might contact a remote viewer, but they don't want it renowned because there's this ridicule of anybody using that kind of input. And I have to, if I don't approach remote police groups, they usually approach me through somebody else. And I've done a couple of those, a couple of cold cases, but nothing's ever really come of them. So, there's this problem of feedback in remote viewing. Sometimes you get feedback, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you have to wait 11 years, 20 years for feedback. If it's I don't have security clearances, but I have been asked to do some, like post 9/11, I did some sessions. And all I got was, thank you, that was very helpful. So with police departments, it's kind of iffy if you'll even be asked. You can't approach them because there's this woo-woo factor and a ridicule factor, because they have input from psychics, like regular psychics, like you wouldn't believe. And they may have valid information, but it's just disregarded. It's just put in the bin. So I will work some cases if there's an active investigation going on, but just to look at a cold case, just to look at it, I probably wouldn't accept.
Yeah, understandable. I can understand that. Thank you. That's the last one for me. Thank you.
Mark, I can answer a bit of that from my viewpoint here in the UK. I've done a lot of cases. I've done over 250 missing person cases working for the United States and Canadian police forces, many different ones. But they were working with a guy called Kelly Snyder, who has a history as an ex-DEA agent, and he's essentially the middleman, a liaison between a group of psychics and the police. So he's in the perfect situation. And it was only working on cases where it was the last resort. You know, the police had nowhere else to go. So they didn't mind then approaching Kelly and the team. And I spoke to him recently, and I think he says, I can't remember what his details were, but I think he says, I asked him for the latest stats on it. I think they have something like a 30% success rate in finding people. He's still working with cases. So that's the US. The US is great, but only if you're asked, you know, is a real hindrance when you get hundreds of psychics on a famous case approach the police with, you know, without being asked, because the police obviously have to follow up each and every claim, and that becomes a hindrance. But the one time I did it in the UK was a local case here in the city of Bath, and it's still an open case. We had this the situation called the Batman Rapist, and you can do a search for that on Google, and it will tell you. And it's still the longest running open case of serial rapist in the UK. And I was training a group of young women in CRV at the time, and as a test project, I said to I set them the target of looking at who is the Batman Rapist, and they came back with some good data. So we sat around the table one day, and I said, okay, what should we do with, naively this is, I said, what should we do with the data? And they all said, let's send it into the police. So I did. I sent it in as a report to the police, only to then, this is where it gets bad, to be dragged into the police station and almost arrested. And I actually became a suspect in the case.
Yep, because you knew information relating to the case.
Because of the information, and because it was local, I was a suspect, and I had an ongoing conflict with the police where they were trying to take DNA off of me.
Oh, wow.
I gave them fingerprints, you know, but I wouldn't. I don't trust the police with DNA, so I wouldn't give them DNA. But because I wouldn't give them DNA, I then had this conflict with the police. And seriously, they would ring me up at like 5 o'clock in the morning and wake me up, and I'd have a police officer. I got take telephone conversations because it got to be so stupid.
Yeah.
But I had the police on the phone, and they would be going, "Well, if you don't give us DNA, then we might just arrest you at work in front of everyone."
Yeah.
Or they would say things like, "We might just come to your house and break down the door and arrest you."
Yeah, bullying tactics, and
yeah. So, but in the end, I never gave in. Though I never gave them DNA, but I did give them 2 sets of fingerprints, and I had to give the superintendent a statement and all kinds of stuff. So I had a bad experience with police in the UK with this kind of thing.
Not going back there again.
Yeah, I'm never gonna approach a police force with information unsolicited again. It's too dangerous.
Yeah, but make sure you check that your fingerprints are removed from the system.
Yeah, that would be good. It was probably about 10 years ago that they took them.
Yeah. I'd still check. I would still check, honestly, seriously.
It's, and you know, I was arguing with him. He was going. I was saying, I'm not giving you DNA because it'd be on the system forever. And the police superintendent was going, no. We'll delete it after 2 years. And I took along loads of printed case studies I found off the internet of where they've kept DNA forever, and they weren't doing it. But yeah, it was a bad experience. But working with the US police forces, I've worked with many of them. Canadian mounted, the Canadian mounted police, I worked on a case with them, and the only payment we got is if we were successful in a case, we got a mug or a cap from the police force. So I have a collection here of caps. So I got a nice one from the Canadian mounted police and stuff.
Well, the person who does work with the US police, this is for Mark too, is Pam Coronado, and she has been so successful. She has boxes lined on her walls with police badges every time she does a case with a police department, she just asks for a badge as a payment. And so she has badges galore with the work that she's done. She's the person to ask about police work.
But if you're interested, Mark, in going down that avenue, I can put you in touch with Kelly. He's always looking for people to work on his team, and with your expertise of being in the police as well, you'd be an even better asset for him.
Yeah, I understand that. But you didn't even get a badge or a mug.
I did in some cases, but not from the UK. People.
Oh, from the UK.
No,
I'll see if I can get you one from the Federation.
All I got was hassle, and that was quite bad. Talking about the Federation, when I'm a graphic designer, and in the early late 80s, we used to do my company used to design and publish the Police Federation magazine. So I actually designed the Police Federation logo for a number of years.
Oh, I've seen that many a time then. I'll send you something from the Federation, Daz. I'll work on something for you as a little memento, a warning to keep away.
Yeah, an apology. Yeah, that'd be nice.
On behalf of the British Police Force.
I've spoken to people in the UK that have missing people and stuff. Because they approach me and you say to them, you're obviously talking to the UK police. Are they willing to cooperate with us and all this kind of stuff? And they're just in the UK. They're just not interested in any way of looking into this kind of research.
Which is why I asked the question, because if I would have gone to one of my inspectors or gaffers on a case, a serious case, murder or something, or a rape, and I suggested that, I would be straight out the door. And when I see American cases and I see them with psychics, as Angela said, at least they're welcomed, and at least, okay, they might not act on all the information, or they don't give us feedback, but it does make up part of the case. Whereas the doors just seem to be shut in the UK, which I think is a great shame.
Yeah, it is a great shame. But Kelly's doing, as I said, Kelly's doing some great work. He claims to have found 30. I think he said to me it's 30% of all the cases they've worked on, which is, when you're talking about missing people, that's a really good statistic and a good amount. But yeah, if you want to go down that route, he's the person to approach. I left after 250 because it was just like, it gets to a stage where you just can't do anymore because a lot of them are dead and raped and murdered, all that kind of stuff, and you get a bit of a burnout.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Daz, I'll add to what Angela said. By coincidence, I just got my certificate from Pam Coronado for the basic psychic detective course today, and I cannot recommend her enough. Mm-hmm. We see people in the forums like, oh, I want to be a psychic detective. I want to save the world. They're sending reports, to police, doing whatever. Anybody that's even remotely interested in this should take Pam's online course. It's $70. It's 4 weeks. You get anywhere from 2 to 4 assignments per week, usually cold cases that already have feedback. You get live video feedback on your sessions. If you're a natural psychic, if you're a medium, if you're a trained psychic, she customizes it. She customized the assignments for me for CRV, and her going through the ethics, the law enforcement interface process. I'm telling you, if you have any interest in this field, and I'm not, I don't know anything about your UK guy, so I'm only speaking about Pam. I just started her intermediate advanced course last night, but that world is not what you think it is. It's not just coming up with, I see a picture of a shallow grave in the woods and then sending that to the police. There's so much more. You have to think about the emotional consequences to the family if you do something stupid. There's so many people, so many things involved. So I can only tell you, Pam, as far as the U.S. is just top of the line.
I'll second that. Yeah.
Great stuff, guys. Well, it's 12:30. We've been on for 2.5 hours, so I'm going to end it there and let Angela go because it's been a long time for her to keep.
Time has flown.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But thanks for everyone for turning up and asking all these interesting questions tonight.
Thank
you. Thank you.
Thank you,
Angela.
Thank you all, and thank you, Daz.
We're in the chat window there, so you can find her on our website and all her books and everything. In a couple of weeks' time, we got Courtney Brown on for a couple of hours, so
Oh.
that should be interesting. You know, so get your questions ready for that one, because he doesn't go on for interviews like this very often, and he's done some controversial stuff. So yeah, arm yourself. But thanks for everyone for turning up, and thank you, Angela. It's been great, and great answers to all the questions from the people.
Well, thank you, Daz, and thank you everybody for coming out today. This is great.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Thank you. Great night. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, take care, everyone, and have a good weekend, and I'll see you soon. Thanks, Angela. Take care, and thank you for that.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Take care.